Chapter 32. All that morning, Nikolai and Maxim worked, sweat pouring from their bodies. It was an amazing and almost comical sight, as the two could be seen approaching the camp. Someone would always signal their arrival with a shout, "Here they come again!" And then everyone within range would stop whatever it was they were doing, prisoners and guards alike. Petya would always come out of the kitchen for a look. It was a great way to take a break. By the time Nikolai and Maxim returned to the camp the third time, everyone was cheering and throwing their caps into the air. Nikolai hardly had time to notice their shouts of encouragement. He did give a tired salute on his entry into camp, and then another wave of his arm again as the cart spun around to make its next trip to the spring. If Nikolai had been watching on the fourth trip back to camp, he would have noticed that even the warden had stopped what he was doing to come out and see the amazing spectacle. By noon, they were already heading out for their fifth trip to the spring. As Nikolai hurried to catch up with the ox, Petya ran alongside him and handed him a small bag with cold turnips and Russian black bread in it. Nikolai had managed to drink a little water each time they stopped at the spring and the camp, but he had not thought of eating. Now he realized that he was famished, and he was so grateful for the friendship of this man who was watching out for him. He ate the turnips as he ran, praying that God would help the food to digest in spite of the conditions in which he was eating the meal. On the return trip, Nikolai saw 4 or 5 of the prairie wolves come out and sit in a row to watch the man and the ox race by. He tossed a chunk of black bread to the wolves and watched them fight over it as the cart raced away to the east. The kilometers became easier to run, and his breathing less strenuous. It was as if God was giving Nikolai a second and third wind, so he could become part of the miracle in action. The day melted away as trip after trip was made, until there was only one last run to be made. By now, the man and beast were running in tandem as though this adventure had turned them into a well oiled machine, and they finished the task with time to spare. By the time the sun dipped below the western horizon, Nikolai had unloaded the last barrel of water, gone to the barracks to clean up, and was on his way to the kitchen to eat the evening meal he knew Petya would have waiting for him there. What a day it had been, and what a lesson in faith for Nikolai. In his heart he knew that he would never again doubt God's amazing watch care and his ability to come to the aid of a soul in need. Of course, Nikolai believed in the power of God to protect and preserve, and he knew of God's willingness to act on behalf of his children in time of need. But he had never experienced such a dramatic display of God's power to vindicate one of its children, and to everyone in camp this had been a clear demonstration of the lengths to which Nikolai's God would go to honor the pastor for his faithfulness. As Nikolai sat in the kitchen eating a bowl of borscht and sipping a cup of tea, the cook spoke of the electricity that had ignited the camp. "You did it again," Petya exclaimed. "It was amazing." "We did it," Nikolai countered. "Maxim and I did it. We owe it to God, from whom all blessings flow." Petya shook his head in disbelief. "I wish you could have seen the two of you," he crowed. "What a sight!" He handed Nikolai another slice of black bread. "You two are like celebrities here in camp now. I don't suppose the warden will ever give you trouble again. He can't. The guards won't let him." On his way back to the barracks, Nikolai stopped to watch the moon rising in the east. The orange oval of light looked warm and inviting, like the feeling he had in his chest. For the first time since arriving in camp over 2 years ago, he felt exhilaratingly free. and God was responsible for it. It had taken a while for Nikolai to see his prayers fully realized, but in the end, things had worked out for the best, with God being justified and Nikolai feeling vindicated. Nikolai decided that it was always best to trust fully in God's timing, because only God could see the end from the beginning. As Nikolai turned to enter the barracks, he could hear the prairie wolves howling somewhere in the distant darkness, but the sound no longer made him feel lonely. He remembered feeling lost and forlorn when he had first arrived in camp. The sound of the prairie wolves had left him feeling empty, and he had even been tempted to feel abandoned by God, but not any longer. Clearer than ever before was his faith in Jesus. It was a moment of truth for him, and it thrilled him thoroughly through and through, to know that God was with him, even on the wastelands of the Siberian tundra. To have a peace like that was truly worth dying for. But of course, it didn't look as if that was what God required now. He had stood the test, and he had come through shining.